I spent a week in Falklands in February 2017. This followed 2 weeks in South Georgia Island, where I departed and returned from Stanley. The population of the Falkland Islands is approximately 3,000 people. Over 2,000 of those people live in Stanley. So Stanley is really the only town of any size in the Falklands, and it contains the government buildings, the newspaper offices, the shops, and all the other things. Stanley was a lovely little town and very, very lovely to look around. It was, I guess it took me back 50 years or so to how things might have been in rural Britain. There was very little internet, the internet was incredibly patchy, but I really enjoyed my time there. There are some small hills on the side of Stanley, beside Stanley, where you can walk and where you can see the detritus of the Falklands War. And the Falklands War plays quite a large part, not only in Stanley but also in the rest of the Falkland Islands, where people are incredibly loyal. So, as well as visiting Stanley, most tourists want to go and visit the various islands, or some of the islands in the Falklands, which are actually serviced by aeroplanes, Falklands taxis as I call them. You decide the day before and let FIGAS, Falkland Islands Government Air Service, know where you want to go, and at 4 o'clock on the day before the flights are taking place, they then decide all the routes and announce not only the routes that they're taking but the people that they are taking from place A to place B and at what time. So basically, if you want to do anything in the Falklands, everybody knows. Sea Lion Island has a history of being involved in the sealing industry, and for a while it was also a sheep farming island. However, both the sealing and the sheep farming have since disappeared from the Sea Lion Island, and Sea Lion's industry, if you want to call it that now, is tourism and nature. You can visit Sea Lion Islands and stay in Sea Lion Lodge to watch nature, to look at the absolutely fantastic display of birds there, and to see the other wildlife creatures. What I found particularly interesting, I guess, after 2 weeks in South Georgia, was that I had a great deal of freedom to wander around not just Sea Lion Island but all of the other islands in the Falklands. They're less concerned about biodiversity and biosecurity, so therefore they just assume and hope that people are actually going to respect the nature there and the animals and not get too close to them. Here we have a bird of prey deciding, first of all, that my walking poles were good fun to play with, and then doing what birds of prey do, which is basically to eat dead animals. Here we have it eating a dead penguin. Not very nice possibly, but that's what people or birds have to do in order to survive in the sort of environments we have in the Falklands. And here we have vultures, who are also part of the scenery or the bird life of the Falklands. The coastline of Sea Lion Island is really interesting and beautiful, with really lovely cliffs, and we had bird nesting animals here on the cliffs. And here we have gentoo penguins, baby gentoo, and following that we have Magellanic penguins and rock hoppers. So it was really interesting to me to see 3 different species of penguins all in the same area. There weren't quite so many, or nothing like the number of penguins in Sea Lion Island or indeed any of the other Falkland Islands as I've seen in South Georgia. That, I think, is partly because there aren't as many, but also partly because it was the end of the breeding season for penguins, and a lot of the penguins had been moving out to to see. And then we found the creatures that Sea Lion Island is named after, which is basically these cute little cuddly looking things, and the larger, more aggressive looking animals. The sea lions, you actually observe them from above, and you're standing on a cliff and they're down on the cliff below. It's probably much better that you are up there and they're down there, because my understanding is that sea lions are very aggressive to anybody who goes close by. So if you're looking to be able to observe nature in a safe environment, then stay on the cliff edge rather than try to scramble down. And of course there were graves. This is actually a grave, interestingly, of a French person who had committed suicide. And now here we are, taking off from Sea Lion Island to the next island. So Peril Island is another haven for animals and bird life. But our main aim in going to Peril Island was to walk across the island. It was incredibly windy the day that we went to Peril Island, but what we wanted to do was walk across 3 hills that sort of run right across the spine of the island, and we had a really, really nice time doing the walk. I didn't take all that many pictures of the walk on Peril Island, partly because it was so windy it was difficult to get the camera out to take pictures while you were still trying to walk. And you can also see there were some lovely flowers and plant life. Those plants were incredibly hard, they were almost like stone. And here we have a memorial to HMS Coventry. There was lots of memorials to the ships and the people who died in the Falkland Islands, and you can see how windy the Falklands are with the shape of these trees, which have actually been sculpted by the wind. Bleaker Island has an organic sheep and cattle industry, and it's also a tourist destination. So we went there obviously as a tourist destination to see the birds and the penguins that lived there. One of the things that defines the islands, I think I spoke before about when I was talking about South Georgia, was what happens when islands have got rats. A lot of the ground nesting birds don't breed. Bleaker Island has several off little islands called Tussock Islands, and some of those are rat free. So some of the ground nesting birds that you won't see, or we wouldn't have seen in Bleaker Island, are actually on some of the smaller islands. I guess there might be hopes that someday Bleaker Island, like its little mini islands, might become rat free, but that would be a sort of major undertaking and extremely costly. And because this is, I think, the island's privately owned, it would be far too expensive for one person or one family to actually pay for it. So I guess they would probably be hoping that the National Bird Trust or of the Falklands or internationally would be prepared to kind of help them out in that regard. So they had Magellanic penguins and rock hoppers on Bleaker Island, and as per usual I spent a very long time just sitting watching penguins and really enjoying their antics. I just really like the rock hoppers penguins. They look to me at times as though I've had a bad hair day. So they can look incredibly grumpy and sort of dissatisfied with life, but my guess is that they're equally as positive about life as, I guess, any other penguin. As you can see here in this penguin, this rock hopper penguin, making sure he looks beautiful by preening himself. There was some really nice plants on Pebble. I guess for me, Carcass Island and West Point where it was the highlight of my island hopping tour to the Falklands. And here I've got whales just literally diving in front of the boat, and that was just an absolutely magnificent sight. I certainly had not seen whales as close up anywhere in South Georgia, where in South Georgia what you could see was whales from a distance. You could see the whale blows, but you couldn't really see them. We stayed on the lodge in Carcass Island and organised a boat trip to West Point. The boat trip was absolutely amazing. We had dolphins basically following the boat and diving beside it. They weren't following the boat, they were actually leading the boat. And I was just absolutely mesmerised by the beauty and the way that the dolphin just sailed through the water. I'm concerned with the fact that there was, well, to their size, quite large objects sort of trailing them. It was just an absolutely spectacular sight, and I enjoyed every minute of watching them. Bird life was also really interesting on the journey to West Point and from West Point, and there was cliff nesting birds and absolutely fantastic, magnificent cliffs to entertain us on the journey, and I just loved the whole thing. On arrival, we did a walk to find, first of all, penguins, and watching the rock hoppers was again really interesting. However, that was not really the highlight of the trip to West Point. We found these skua and they were really interesting to see, but if you just give the video a very short time to run through some of the birds, you will see just the total highlight of the whole trip, which were the baby albatrosses. We were sitting almost inches from the baby albatrosses and watching them being fed by their mothers. It was just totally amazing. We sat so close to them and they were completely unconcerned with our presence. When they were on their own, sitting on the nest, the babies just cried constantly for mum to come and feed them. And when the mum came, she had food for them and they were just sort of pecking away and wanting fed immediately. It was just quite an amazing sight, and I was very reluctant to leave the baby albatross colony and return back when the guy who was taking us back to Carcass Island indicated that we really had to leave. I was kind of hanging on, hoping that he would somehow forget that I was there and let me stay. It didn't happen, but I had an absolutely incredible experience sitting so close to these beautiful birds and just watching their antics. And then on my return I decided to play around with some artistic, shall I say, pictures of the albatross. I particularly like the first picture that you saw, which was a vague albatross, and there are some other ones that I really like as a sort of on a kind of artistic level, and I guess I hope you also quite enjoy them as well. There were signs of the Falklands War everywhere in the Falklands, and there was mementos, graves, crosses showing not just the Falklands War but praising the people from Britain who'd actually given their lives to rescue the Falklands from Argentina. In many ways, the Falklands Islanders are actually more British than British people. In fact, I would probably say in almost every way they're more British than British people. They are very, very proudly British and make that obvious in everything. A lot of what they say and do. They do allow and encourage and support Argentinians to come to the Falklands, but I think that's more because they know that they bring in money, and Falkland Islands, like any other country, needs money to survive. There's been a massive mine clearing in the Falklands, so almost all of the Falklands are mine free. However, there is the odd place where you get danger mine signs, and here we have, on the way out of Falklands, you leave one shoe if you're going to come back and two if you're not